Previously on the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast.
We also have a new anthology coming out by Dave Rudden. The Wintertime Paradox will be out, and it's a collection of stories about Doctor Who Christmases past, present, and future. At the back of the book, there's a little mini bio for him, and it says he's a former actor, teacher, and time-displaced Viking, currently living in Dublin.
Have you seen a photo of him?
Yes.
Yes.
It seems accurate.
He is very much a time-displaced Viking. His hair is very... Well, do we say auburn or do we say ginger these days? I don't know, but it's very red. And quite impressive beard in some of the photos. So, yeah.
And now our story continues.
Welcome, everyone, to a special episode of the all-new Adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. This is Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London.
And Dave in Dublin.
Dave, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And for folks who aren't aware, this is Dave Rudden, author, who's joining us for an interview episode.
Yeah, delighted to be here. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Yeah.
It's snowing here in Minnesota already.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's coming down quite heavily, so it kind of fits the mood of the book, too, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're in London, Chris?
Yes. Yeah, South London.
Very good, very good. I have not yet been to Minnesota, but I've always wanted to go because you guys have apparently a really lovely winter festival. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, both regular and Doctor Who related. We have
cool.
a Doctor Who convention in January of all times. But so, Dave, you've recently written a brand new Doctor Who book, The Wintertime Paradox, and we're delighted that you can join us to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to chat about the book and all things Doctor Who.
Cool.
And it was just published by Puffin, Penguin Random House in the UK.
Penguin in conjunction with BBC Books.
Wonderful. And of course, you're no stranger to our podcast. We reviewed the first Doctor Who anthology you had written back in, I want to say, December of last year.
Yeah, it was our Christmas special.
Seems like a while ago.
Yes, it feels like a decade ago.
It's so much has happened this year, and it's either been the longest year and the shortest year all at once. Like, it feels like January, February, quarantine, October, but also so much has happened. So many tiring things.
So how did this book come about? So it's a follow-up to 12 Angels Weeping, and it's kind of a similar structure. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing yet. I'm over halfway through it.
Oh, amazing.
Just finished the story about Rory and River in Stormcage, which was very exciting.
Oh, brilliant. To give a little backstory with myself and Doctor Who, I'm from a tiny village in rural Ireland, and this sounds like a little bit like when your grandfather says how hard things were when they were growing up, but I grew up with like 2 TV channels. I only had 2 Irish TV channels and no BBC. So my very first interaction with Doctor Who, my very first sort of consumption of Doctor Who media was I went to my local library and I picked up a copy of Alien Bodies by Lawrence Miles.
Oh, yeah.
It's my first introduction to the universe. So confusing. I was like, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm really enjoying it. So my first sort of experience of Doctor Who was through Target novelizations and through the different books that my tiny library had. And I went to college, I studied teaching, managed to move somewhere that actually had like internet and proper TV, and sort of I started college the same year the series came back in 2005, so obsessively watched every week along with a group of nerds, fellow nerds, and it was amazing. It was. I remember we watched the Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang, like 30 of us college students in like a room cheering like it was the Super Bowl, like yelling at the screen when certain things happened. Yeah, and then I ended up publishing a trilogy of young adult books called Knights of the Borrowed Dark with Puffin. And I remember just before the first book came out in 2016, I was at a dinner with some of the fancy publishing people, and one of them was like, "Oh, are you a Doctor Who fan?" And I was like, "Yeah, I love it with my tiny ginger heart." And she was like, "Oh, well, I'm actually in charge of all the Doctor Who books at Puffin. Would you ever think about writing one?" And my editor like teleported in between us and was like, "Natalie's finished the books. We've actually bought them. Thanks very much. Don't distract him. He's very easily excited." And sure enough, 3 years later, when the last book of the trilogy was handed in, I got a phone call from my agent at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, which is either a really good sign or a really bad sign. And she was like, "You're a fan of Doctor Who?" And I was like, "I am. Why?" And she said, "Oh, well, Penguin want to know, would you like to write an anthology of short stories about the monsters of Doctor Who?" And not just the writing of a Doctor Who anthology, but about the monsters. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so in." And she was like, "Now they need a first draft in 3 months." And I was like, "Tell them I can do it." And she's like, "Can you do it?" I was like, "Tell them I can do it." And I'll figure out whether I can actually do it along the way. And that was 12 Angels Weeping, which came out in December 2018. And then after it came out, people enjoyed it, which I'm really grateful for. And so they came back to me and said, "Would you like to do 12 more stories about Christmas?" And I jumped at the chance, basically. So that's the Wintertime Paradox.
Wow, fantastic. That the Wintertime Paradox. It's a collection of stories about Doctor Who Christmases past, present, and future.
Yeah, no, it's really fun writing short story collections, because to me it feels like you're writing a season of Doctor Who, but instead of being one of the TV writers, you can pick doctors from all across the history. You can pick any amount of monsters. There's no budgetary concerns, which is really nice. So I like these sort of approach these bite-sized chunks of adventures. It's really fun.
One of the things I've noticed is, especially in this collection, you're picking very interesting points in the Doctor Who timeline to set your stories. So, for example, the story that kicks off the collection, He's Behind You, is set shortly after the Ninth Doctor is regenerated into the 10th. And you're seeing that through Rose's eyes. So you're getting this added layer of, newness with the Doctor. And similarly with the Davros story, that's set at a very critical and interesting point in his timeline too. So just kudos to you for that, because it's, it's one thing to write a Doctor Who story, but then to also pick certain inflection points where things really deserve additional explanation, and it helps drive the narrative. So it's like an added layer of thought that we don't necessarily always get with some of the books that we review. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh no, that's true. Thank you. That's really lovely to say. I mean, my approach when it comes to writing Doctor Who, which is still a thing that the 15-year-old in me just like loses their mind whenever they say that. But I'm very much of the view that like all fiction is fan fiction, and all fiction is a response to something that either you love and want to emulate or want to do your own take on, or something that you hate and want to take revenge on. And going into Doctor Who, because I'm so aware that I am taking a small step into a universe that so many people hold dear, I never try and like lay claim to or write the definitive version of any aspect of Doctor Who, but I feel the only thing I can do is speak to the moments and character elements that really resonate with me, the ones I've always wanted to see more of. I mean, for me with Cybermen, for example, they're tragic, and for me will always be tragic from their first appearance. It's sort of I remember watching The 10th Planet when I was younger, and like the way Cybermen talk sound like a kid trying not to cry, where it's like, I'm not upset, I have no emotions, and they're going kind of higher and higher. And so for me, anytime I approach writing Cybermen, they have to be sad. And kind of the great thing about writing Doctor Who is there are so many people doing it that, like, if you want your irredeemable Cybermen, there's an author for that. If you want your Legion of Steel, there's a writer for that. Whereas for me, if you want tragedy, come to me. So it's fun. So like in this kind of in both anthologies, so many of the stories take inspiration from a single throwaway line or a single moment that must have happened, even though we don't maybe have the time to see it on screen. And especially with 12 Angels Weeping, when I was approaching the monsters, it was really nerve-wracking because obviously there have been other people have written the Daleks and other people have written the Ice Warriors, and I had to try and find the thing that interested. It was almost like reducing a stew. I had to reduce each of these foes to their primary elements, the thing that has made them stick around for so long. And for the Ice Warriors, my story, Red Planet, it was the honor that they have, these sort of noble samurai aspect, and also their sort of love affair and love of Mars. That had to be a character in the story, and that's kind of what separates them from Draconians or Silurians or anybody else. And so for me, I'm always looking for that resonance that I have with a moment, but also what is the essence of this? Because I sort of look for, I guess I call it like thematic sequels, where it's like, how do I say something new and something deep about these creatures that other people have written?
The thing that I found really remarkable about your first book, and I've not read your second book, so I'm sure it's equally true, is how you are able to say... yeah, I'm sure it is how you're able to say kind of like fresh things. Because I mean, one of the things I do remember so vividly from that first book of yours is, was, as you were saying, like the sadness of the Cyberman, and also as well the Sontaran, your Sontaran story with the artificial intelligence,
a soldier's education.
Yes, which was just so gorgeous. But yeah, it did make me think, did you have any how much input did Cardiff or Sheffield or wherever it is that the BBC production office in space these days have with your stories? I mean, did you have to get all the storylines approved, or I was just wondering how that process went.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because it is one thing that I really try and do. Like I visit a lot of schools and do a lot of writing events, and I always try and make writing as the process as transparent as possible, because it is really opaque when you're outside of writing. And as somebody who's grown up loving tie-in fiction, I've always wondered how much oversight there is, and whether that changes from franchise to franchise. With Doctor Who and with particularly Puffin and the relationship with BBC Books, the way that it worked for both anthologies was, once I was asked to do them, I then had a few weeks to come up with short pitches for each story. So with 12 Angels Weeping, we sort of had a motif, which was the 12 Angels Weeping, 11 Cybermen, whatever the order. I can't really remember now what the order was. I'm very tired. And that was really easy because they'd picked the 12 of the top. I mean, Doctor Who is an incredible rogues gallery, but they'd picked the go-to 12 top foes. Although I will say, and maybe I shouldn't, the 5 golden rings part of that song, they'd gone for 5 rings of, how do you say it?
Akatan.
Yeah, yep. And I was like, I'm not writing a story about that. I don't know what I do. Can we maybe swap it out for something else? And then we swapped it to Ood, and that story broke my heart. I'm never writing a heist story ever again. They're so difficult. I was like, I hate this story. So they were like, okay, give us an angel story, give us a Jadoon story, give us a Sontaran story. And some of them came easy. The first story in that series I wrote was Ghost in the Machine, the Cyberman story. And because in my Knights of the Power Dark books, my voice is I kind of write the way that I talk. I make a lot of jokes. It's kind of fun and fast moving. It's very influenced by growing up with Doctor Who. I was like, all right, my challenge is to try and write in a really sparse, cold, mechanical style, because this story is from the point of view of a Cyberman. And in your 12 Angels Weeping coverage, Matt, I think you said that there is a risk when it's one person writing 12 stories in a row that it's going to be samey. And so really going in, I was like, in much the same way that Doctor Who is at times a horror and at times action and at times a small drama, I was very clear that I need to make the voices different. The plots obviously need to be different. Viewpoints need to be different. So that was really fun. It was a little bit like what I imagine putting together the song list for an album was, where it's like, okay, this story is going to be a heartbreaker. This story then needs to be fun. This story then needs to be scary. And so each story, I really tried to approach things in a new way and just had so much. The Sontaran story, which is the second one I did, was just so much fun to write. Like I found myself trying to do the Sontaran voice while writing it because there's just something so joyously belligerent about the Sontarans, and hearing Nick Briggs do the Sontaran voice, like it's such a compliment to hear him read my words. But each story I tried to do something new with and try and find a new angle. And Wintertime Paradox, some of the stories there's no direct sequels, I guess, because I didn't want to freeze anybody out who hadn't read the first book. And you can read them separately. They're not exactly they're a thematic sequel more so than a narrative sequel. But the Sontaran story in Wintertime Paradox, which is called For the Girl Who Was Everything, which is my Petronella Osgood Does Die Hard in the Black Archive story.
Just read that one this morning. It was fantastic.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you liked it. But specifically, I did that because somebody said, I enjoyed the story in 12 Angels Weeping, but I don't like the Sontarans being made a joke. And when I heard that, I'm like, I love hearing people engage with what I like. Even if they liked it or didn't like it, that's totally fine by me. But I was like, they're right. Sontarans aren't all a joke. So I was like, okay, my mission now is to make Sontarans scary. And a lot of the stories in Wintertime Paradox are almost a response to other bits and pieces I've heard, or a response to something I saw in the episode, or even just a response to my wife does not like Doctor Who. I have tried to make her watch it, and because she's a completionist, I was like, I'll put together like a really lovely boutique list of episodes you should watch. And she was like, no, I'll start at the beginning. And then came back a couple of days later and was like, it's not for me. And I was like, that is totally fine. That's totally fair. And I was like, what do you not like about it? And everything that she didn't like about, so the Master story in 12 Angels Weeping is about the Master impersonating the Doctor, and that's entirely based on the list of things my wife gave me about, like, I just don't like the way he shows up and tells you his life is more interesting than yours. And I was like, check. That is something I could use for this story. I don't like the way, like, he just leaves his companions behind. Okay, check. So I, like, used all these things that could be so easily, when the Doctor does them, they're all lovely and compassionate and fun and exciting, but can very easily be dialed towards evil. So, yeah, I get inspiration from everywhere.
That Master story you mentioned, I think it's an unnamed Master, but looking back on it, it's almost like Sacha Dhawan would have fit perfectly into that story.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, when I was writing it, my goal was to present sort of this is going to sound really pretentious and I apologize, like an Master and an Doctor. Like, I really tried to keep it as unclear as possible as to who these characters were, and it was more their essences and who they are as an archetype, as opposed to a specific. And then I just like stole particular mannerisms from all the different Masters and all the different Doctors. But yeah, I really think he could fit in as. Yeah, I think he could. That's kind of the fun thing. Like, the Master is always the Master, even if some of the furniture changes and some of the mannerisms change. There's always a thread connecting all those different actors.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that is present in both of these are illustrations from Alexis Snell. Can you speak a little bit about those and the style of them?
Yes, so the book itself is just this gorgeous production. It's, hardback, like beautiful sort of embossed cover. And when I was asked to do it, they let me know, I think maybe a couple of months into the process, it's going to be illustrated. And I was just blown away, because I just think it's the first time I've had a book illustrated, and it's a really lovely compliment and conversation then with an artist to see what they think is important about your stories to illustrate. And then Alexis Snell's really gorgeous, almost woodcut, like linotype illustrations are really striking and really stylized. And I saw them all pretty much after each story was written, and they were like, oh, if you've got like comments, but there's nothing I could say about them to make them any better. They are this really beautiful, weird, striking images. So yeah, Alexis is an incredible talent, and it really makes the books kind of singular.
Mm-hmm. And they really do kind of, because your books, they've come out in October, kind of that autumn time frame, and then leading into Christmas and the holiday season. And the illustrations somehow just really lend themselves to that time of year too, almost how I'd imagine classic Doctor Who being transmitted in the evenings, in the fall in the UK back in the day.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah, that's a really lovely idea. I think that like the production of the book really sort of screams kind of like coziness and heading into the darkness basically, and they're lovely. They really are.
Do you have a favorite or comfort era of Doctor Who, like a era that you return to time and again, or a certain Doctor companion that strikes you as kind of your, I'll pop this DVD in, or I'll watch this on streaming sort of thing?
Yeah, so for me, it's definitely New Who more than Classic Who. New Who is the one I watched sort of week to week, and it felt really is the one I obsessively kind of rewatch. There are serials I'll revisit from Classic Who, but I'm definitely more of a like Eccleston, Tennant, Matt Smith's first season in particular, I absolutely love. The moment, that raucous room of Who fans who watched that every time it was aired, the moment when the Doctor is talking to Amy and he says, "Where were your parents?" You could hear a pin drop, because we're suddenly rethinking the entire season in our heads, being like, why did we never ask? And that is like the trick of a great writer, is to make you not ask the obvious question. And we were like going, how did we not think of that? Like, where were her parents? And like that season for me is really that the fairy tale mythic aspect of it, I think, is really beautiful. I could write 12 and Bill forever. Like there's a 12 and Bill story in Wintertime Paradox, and that pretty much wrote itself, because they're just such a fun team, and I love their setup, and I love Bill. I really love her. I really enjoyed season 12 of Jodie's second season. Particularly, I've rewatched Resolution 2 or 3 times now, because I'm a sucker for the lone villain, somehow scarier than a legion of villains idea. So I've really enjoyed that. But yeah, it's Tennant, particularly like first 2 seasons, Eccleston season, and then I'll dip in and around from there. What about you guys? What's your favorite, like, what is your go-to? What's your comfort DVD?
For me, I would say it's probably the Graham Williams era of Doctor Who, particularly Romana as a companion. Mm-hmm. That dynamic of the two of them in the TARDIS, whether it's the first Romana or second Romana, is just the era I keep coming back to time and again. My overall favorite Doctor is probably the second, but yeah, there's just something about the Graham Williams era, and just especially how campy it gets too. That appeals to me. How about you, Chris?
For me, it's Seventh Doctor and Ace, but I think that's me showing my age. But they're also, it's probably more the Seventh Doctor in the New Adventures, which I found it so fascinating that your first exposure is alien bodies.
It was, I mean, it's such a good book.
It is.
And it is the most, if you're going to start with Lawrence Miles, it's the Lawrence Miles book to start on. And I think I had known what Dalek were, obviously, before that, because they're such a huge thing in the cultural consciousness. But the moment where you come across another trope I love is the thing so scary, but then it gets killed by a bigger, scarier thing. I'm sure there's a fancier name for it than that. But when you come across the Daleks being peeled by the Crotons, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, just it's got a real sharp sort of like, the Lawrence Miles stuff that I've read is very like, it reminds me of like Alan Moore's Constantine, as particularly like Dead Romance and things like that. But like just, yeah, the man had an incredible vision for Who, and like not afraid to dip into real horror with this kind of like almost noir edge. Yeah, big fan of that.
Your point about the cultural consciousness made me think, here in the UK we don't hear much about kind of like Irish fandom, so I was just wondering how big a part of culture is, or geek culture is, Doctor Who in Ireland.
You know, it's not as big as it would be in the UK, certainly. Yeah. I mean, it is something that has definitely been watched a lot, but we've never aired it here, obviously, because we get like BBC and stuff, and there are fans, but I definitely get more of a response. Like if I'm in a school in the UK and I talk about Doctor Who, there's a bit more of a whereas if I'm in Ireland, they're like, all right. In that wonderful way that like teenagers do, where they're like, yeah, that's fine. It's like, but it's interesting, because one of the stories in particular in 12 Angels Weeping, the Jadoon story, I specifically wanted to set it in Ireland, and specifically in 60s Ireland, because that story came to be sort of like whole, because when I got the call about doing 12 Angels Weeping, I obviously told my wife Sarah, and she was delighted, and then I told a friend of mine, Sarah Griffin, who is an author, and her response is really odd, because she was like, oh, I must tell my mum. And I was like, oh, is that she? oh, why must you tell your mom? And she was like, well, my mom grew up in the 60s and 70s in Ringsend, in a suburb of Dublin, and she was a huge fan of Doctor Who. She fell in love with physics as an 8-year-old because of dollhouses and the concept of smaller things inside smaller things inside smaller things. And then the nuns who were teaching her told her, girls don't do science. Science is a boys' thing. Like, they literally said to her, this will give you notions beyond where you're going to end up, so I drop it. And she loved Doctor Who, but she was actually apparently so frightened by it as a kid that her granny wrote an angry letter to the BBC being like, stop being so scary, Doctor Who, because you're traumatizing my 8-year-old in an area of Dublin. And when she told me this, I said, oh, do you want me to put her in the Doctor Who universe? And she was like, shut up. And I was like, no, I mean, I'm having an idea. I was really stuck for a Jadoon idea. So I was like, I'm going to do Black Beauty with Jadoon. This was before the 13th Doctor had arrived. She'd been announced, but she hadn't arrived yet. And so I went to my editor and I said, can I do a 13th Doctor story because of this connection with young Patricia Kiernan? And my editor was like, no, you can't, because we can't release the scripts to you, and it's pre her showing up, so we just can't do it. And I was like, okay. So I went and I wrote it anyway, and I sent it to him. I gave them the story, and I was like, I know I wasn't supposed to do this. Please don't put me in trouble. And he read it, and he came back and was like, all right, I cried at my desk. We'll put it in. So yeah.
And that one was reprinted in the 2020 annual as well with some additional illustrations, and that was just a fantastic pick.
Getting to give that annual to the real Patricia Kiernan was just one of the most lovely. She's on the wiki now. She's officially Doctor Who canon, which is really lovely.
Oh, that's fantastic. I noticed too that the 12th Doctor and Bill story is set in Dublin in the near future, which is kind of cool to see too.
Are there any other... I did think that part of why you just set it in Ireland was possibly because there isn't a lot of other Doctor Who set in Ireland. There's the Book of Kells, I think, from the 8th Doctor audios. And also, for an exciting moment, it looks as if part of the finale of the most recent season might be set in Ireland. But I was just wondering, were there other things in the anthology that were kind of like, well, maybe not so much correcting wrongs, but sort of things that you felt Doctor Who needed to do that hadn't really done, or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I try not to go in with an axe to grind because there is the risk, I guess, of getting too personal and solving an issue that you thought was an issue, but that might lock other readers kind of out of their stories. I do, like every other Irish person, anytime anything is set in Ireland from any other country, I do watch it like a hawk to see what was gotten right. Like I think the Sons of Anarchy go to Ireland at some stage and it's unwatchable. But actually the Brendan scenes in those last 3 episodes, and again that had the single villain being scarier than like the lone Cyberman in that Byron episode is scarier than 1,000 Cybermen. You know, and I love the creaky, clashery android aspect of them. It's so great.
On the Haunting of Villa Diodati and the Brendan references, do you think those are all set in Ireland because of the Gallifrey connotation to being somewhere in Ireland? The one-off line from Human Nature? I wonder if that's why.
Oh, I like that. I don't know. It's so specific. You know, it's not something you kind of do by accident. And I think because initially when watching that episode, I was like, is he the lone Cyberman? And are we about to see some sort of Mondas by way of Donegal sort of like thing happening here? It's so interesting. I feel that like every single writer and creator of Doctor Who is having their own conversation with the mythos and doing their own little call outs. And you can almost diagnose what areas of who they're in love with by the little things that they pop in and stuff. But I was watching that, you know, the fact that the building said Garda, I was like, okay, that is the Irish word for guard. You've got that right. You didn't call them policemen, which would be a very different thing. Also, the Gardaí in Ireland are unarmed and have always been unarmed. And so when the thief pulls a gun, I was like, if he pulls a gun back, that's not accurate. That's wrong. But like, luckily, the accents were good. I suppose there are like, specifically that first story, the Rhino of 23 Strand Street. there were things I had to get right about it, particular to that time, that era. So there's a line in it that I didn't think I'd get away with where they describe Aunt Catherine, who hated the Brits and put brown sauce in her tea. And I remember they came back and were like, now, wouldn't hating the English be more grammatically correct? And I was like, no, at that time you would have said the Brits. And they were like, oh, okay, fair enough. And it's funny that because you asked me earlier about things that we had to change with the BBC, and I completely forgot to properly answer that question. But there's been very funny tweaks that have had to be made to the stories because of that. Because the way it works is I send a pitch, they approve the pitch, I write it, my editor at Penguin edits them, and then the BBC approve each story and go through it to make sure that I'm on brand with my characters and that I haven't broken the lore, or that I've just gotten it right, because it is their baby. And there have been little small, so with that story there was that thing. With my Cyberman story, he's called 9.9-X1V, and they were like, oh no, hang on, have the Cybermen ever had a naming convention? And I was like, in the 10th planet they were called Krail or something, and they were like, okay, well, make it clear it's only the 12th Legion of the Cybermen who call themselves by barcodes. And I was like, okay, a little tweak there. That book also has a Vastra Jenny story. Mm-hmm. And I describe, because in my research, because I do a lot of research to these stories, I had come across the Silurians having multiple gods, and it's Dagon, and it's all kind of a little bit Lovecraftian. So I invented a bit of a pantheon for them. I imagined Vastra at least paying some homage to a sort of a huntress god. And they were like, oh, now hang on, are the Silurians definitively polytheistic? And I was like, I think so. And they were like, please keep it vague. And I was like, okay. So, and then I was like, can I do the Nightmare Child? They're like, sure. And I was like, okay, sure, fine. I do regret, with that story, I regret making it clear that is only a glimpse of a newborn, and there is more Nightmare Child to come and stuff. But yeah, it's funny. I remember with the Celestial Intervention, a Gallifreyan Noir, which is my love letter to the Doctor Who wiki, because I had to do a Time Lord story. So I was, I used the wiki a lot to look for the particular stories that I need to be reading and researching. And the Doctor's origin story segment is 18 miles long to try and encompass every single detail of every single conflicting origin story. It's got the throwaway line about him being a cheesemaker. It's got, Time Lord University and all this stuff that's been retconned or ignored or moved around. And so I decided I would write a story about a detective trying to excavate all this stuff. But I mentioned lung barrow at one point, and the editor came back to me and was like, oh, Jesus, Dave, please, you're going to open a can of worms if you mention lung barrow. And I was like, it'll be fine. Nobody is highly invested in looms. I'm sure there won't be a lot of sudden interest.
There's some fantastic deep cuts in Wintertime Paradox that I've come across already. There's a reference to Braxiatel, and
oh, yeah.
I think Davros at one point thinks about the spider Dalek redesigns that never really got off the ground.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's great.
Yeah, I try not to let it overtake me sometimes. There's just a lovely moment to call back on something. Or I think when in 12 Angels Weeping, the Sontarans are going through the moments where they've met the Doctor, and at one point they refer to the Doctor as a time warrior, which is kind of there's lots of little minor shout outs and the kind of silly moments where I'm amusing myself. It's really fun, and I like those little shout outs. There's a bit in the Doctor, what story is it? He's Behind You, where Rose and 10 go to the Panto, and because that was the first the seasons that I watched so religiously, when the psychic paper once again dumps them in trouble because they think that Rose is a Gallifreyan professor. She's a professor of time vortexes and lupine morality, which I was confusing PhDs to have. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
One thing we noticed too in the Wintertime Paradox is that there's a bit of I don't know if you'd call it a framing narrative, but I noticed there's a couple of characters that pop up more than once, and I guess there was a tie-in story that was released when the book was published that ties into Time Lord Victorious. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so for anybody who's listening who has their Timeline Victorious map out in front of them and is wondering where the Wintertime Paradox fits in, it is a standalone book, and I found out about the Time Lord Victorious event But midway through writing the Wintertime Paradox, the fun thing about writing a short story anthology is you sort of take it on in 12 bits. So I had maybe 2 or 3 of the stories done, and I found out that this tie-in was happening, and I had already been putting together this sort of loose meta-narrative that connects the stories, because I'm always looking to push myself, and writing 12 Angels Weeping, which is my first short story anthology, I knew I could write a short story anthology, so I wanted to see could I do a connecting meta-narrative. I had already had in mind who the villains might be, because, you know, again, starting my Doctor Who journey with Lawrence Miles, I have a love for Faction Paradox. And once I found out what the events of Time Lord Victorious and this kind of messing around with time, I realized that it was almost creepily fortuitous that the two could kind of come together. So I was asked to write a short story that would provide a little bit of sinew between the Time Lord Victorious event and the Wintertime Paradox. So I wrote this free story, which is up on the BBC website, called Canaries. And it's effectively the cold open for the Wintertime Paradox. You don't need to read it to enjoy the book, but it is there and it's free. And Faction Paradox, or what I like to call them, Fraction Paradox, because my guys are a splinter of a splinter, very much don't want to take ownership of something that belongs to and means so much to so many people. But I really wanted to play with the concept of these dark paradox worshipping. There's a line in the story where they describe themselves as a skin tag at the edge of the universe, the niggling sense that time travel shouldn't and will never make sense, and they're there to exploit that gap. So yeah, they were a lot of fun to play with.
Did you speak to Lawrence Miles at all as part of writing Canaries, or?
I didn't. So What I did was I've put it quite clearly in the story, that in the stories, once you read out Wintertime Paradox, that they don't take the place of or serve as descendants or serve as, they're more of a continuation of concept than a continuation of a plot line that belongs to somebody else. And they're also not the only version of it. I sort of try and make it very clear in the story that this is a splinter of the Miles' Faction Paradox, and all those other variants of Faction Paradox exist still out there. I'm not excising or rendering them sort of obsolete. I spoke to one of the authors of the Faction Paradox line for Obverse, and they were like, "Oh, Faction Paradox are all about the serial numbers filed off. Don't worry at all." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's reassuring." So
you kind of make that point in the introduction to the book too, where you paint this just really vivid picture of Doctor Who as this kind of sprawling mansion, and there's different rooms to explore throughout, and you never know what's around the corner. And it's just hadn't really seen that analogy before with Doctor Who fandom and all the different types of stories that can be told, but just a really cool imagery.
Yeah, the more you know about Doctor Who, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you realize that it's sort of this ever-growing, expanding, convoluted, glorious mess of a thing. And I'm just trying to eke out my own little corner, and before my torch runs out and I'm lost in the dark, basically.
Well, you're in one of its many libraries.
Yeah, you guys are the librarians.
In a secret meeting room behind a bookcase.
You're the archaeologist / Indiana Jones-esque, rappelling down into weird lore. It's great.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we shall. Are there any particular Doctor Who authors, I know you've spoken of Florence Miles, but are there any others that you feel have had a kind of a great influence upon you?
Authors in terms of the books, or just in general, sort of?
I was thinking of the books, but yeah, but also from the TV as well, or any particular writers that you feel have had an influence or that you particularly enjoyed?
Yeah, so I am a Stephen Moffat fan. I do particularly like his earlier episodes. We used to get very excited every time his name would flash up on screen. Justin Richards as well. I think Demontage was maybe the second or third Doctor Who book that I read. There's loads. I tend to be quite bad when it comes to names of writers for things. I just remember certain scenes or certain moments.
Do you know if the Wintertime Paradox is going to be getting an audiobook version like 12 Angels Weeping did?
Yeah, it is. The audiobook just came out, and there's a little bit of a delay because, it's been read by Ace, which is amazing.
Sophie Aldred, awesome.
Yeah. So I just found that out myself. It was because everything with COVID has been such a weird time, and so we were sort of because I read 4 of the stories for 12 Angels Weeping, along with Nicholas Briggs and Pippa Bennett Warner, which was incredibly humbling because I read my own audiobooks and I don't do accents, but I'm fairly okay at like reading my work. And then I listen to Pippa Bennett Warner switch between a neutral British accent, a perfect Scottish accent, and a perfect American accent in the space of a paragraph. And I was like, I can't read these anymore. What a dip in quality. But yeah, Sophie Aldred has read The Wintertime Paradox, and it is currently out now, basically, which is very exciting. So
And 12 Angels Weeping at the beginning of the month, the paperback version of that came out as well, so more options to get that. But if I would recommend readers spring for the hardcover edition, because it is gorgeous, and the embossed cover is fantastic too. But it's nice to have those options. The Wintertime Paradox, the Canary short story is included as part of the digital package. So if you have the hardcover, you can still access that extra story for free. But if you have the digital version, it's included there.
Yeah, and the story is up for free on the BBC website, so it's there for grabbing as well.
Your mention of your work performing for schools made me think, as I had a quick watch of one of the videos. I think you did, was it Novel Teen?
Oh yeah,
yes, which was for I can't remember the name of the museum it was in Ireland.
The Museum of Literature Ireland.
Yes,
Molly.
yes, yes, yeah. I thought that was fantastic. I watched a video about character and your 3 key things for a character, which I am going to forget. I was sort of fabulous. I was just wondering, how many other, do you have any other masterclasses that people can access sort of online?
Yeah, so Molly have a great run of different YA authors taking on different topics, and I do one on character, I do one on coming up with monsters, and you can also, to sound really basic, but I think like because I have a list of some stuff on my website, which is just daverudden.com, but if you Google Dave Rudden and go to videos, there's usually they kind of crop up from different places, because I tend to I've got some for RTE Junior, which is sort of one of our TV channels here. I've got they're sort of like all kind of around the place. I've done a couple of podcasts. There's an RTE Junior podcast, but I do 2-minute writing tips on all of those. If you Google RTE Junior Children's Book Podcast, I do a 2-minute tip every episode, and I'm always kind of looking for kind of the tip, like I try and look for writing tips that are simple but deep, basically. So like the kind of, because I'm big into the accessibility of writing, and I firmly believe that anybody can write. It's just a muscle you can train. It's not talent or magic. And so I'm always looking for those tips that work really well if you're a beginner, but also you can keep digging through them and find new stuff, even if you're like quite trained and quite professional with it and stuff. So there's lots of stuff out there.
And that ties into the dedication for Wintertime Paradox, where you dedicate the book to anybody out there who's ever been told that writing fan fiction is a waste of time.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I got my start in writing in fan fiction, and I firmly believe it's a really great way to start writing, because people imagine writing as one job when actually it's like 100. It's, character and setting and plot and editing and dialogue and action and pacing and description and all this. And if you start with fan fiction, as I did, some of those sliders are already controlled by somebody else. So with Doctor Who, if you start Doctor Who fan fiction, depending on the era you write in, the tone is there, a lot of the character is there, some of the world building is there, and that allows you to focus in then on coming up with plots and coming up with description. And so you're not biting off more than you can chew. Like, so many people I talk to are like, how do I write an amazing fantasy novel? And I was like, well, start small and build yourself up. Don't imagine you're going to write a Game of Thrones or an Earthsea on your first try. Like, learn each part of the craft and train yourself up. And fan fiction is a really good way of doing that. It's also just fun. Like, it's like everyone starts with cover music, like you start off learning Wonderwall and then you eventually branch out to something else. This is not the Wonderwall of books. Oh no, what a terrible, yeah.
It's still pretty good. And I'm only halfway through it.
What other franchises did you write fan fiction for?
So I wrote Doctor Who, I wrote Warhammer 40k, which is quite different than Doctor Who. There's still the same amount of epic speeches, but they don't really solve anything, and compassion isn't a huge thing. What else? I wrote Baldur's Gate fan fiction, which is quite niche.
Yes, yeah, okay.
I started writing a novelization of the first game at 12. and got about three areas in before realizing that I was very tired. And like, I was like, I'm not going to do this entire thing. But yeah, like lots of different bits and pieces. I remember I wrote a lot when I was in college. I wrote a lot of 11 fan fiction because the cracks really interested me, because I started thinking about my definition of a good idea as something that gives you lots more ideas. And so I began, and actually a part of one of those fan fiction stories where I started imagining all these people. What's the line? A kid fell from a balcony and never hit the ground. 2 civilizations froze to death when their sun disappeared, unable to ever remember being warm. And those lines actually made it into Student Bodies, my silent story in 12 Angels Weeping, because the cracks to me were just a really great horror idea. The idea that you don't just disappear, no one remembers you, is just fascinating and gross.
Wow. Anything else you'd want to bring up or mention before we...
What else do I have to rant about? Where shall we see? So Wintertime Paradox is out now, which is really exciting. The audiobook is also out now, which is great. 12 Angels Weeping is still around and available to read. And yeah, and if you've got a 11 to 13-year-old who likes monsters and a very stressed teenager who is trying to save the world but is also slowly turning to iron, you might enjoy my trilogy Knights of the Borrowed Dark, which is available in ebook and physical book and by an audiobook by me. So they're kind of horror meets fantasy. There's a lot of the monsters are pretty grim in it, which is a lot of fun for me. It's kind of very Lockwood and Co, Derek Landy, like Owen Colfery kind of stuff.
Very cool.
Do you have any upcoming projects or anything? I mean, I appreciate you probably won't be able to speak too much. Also, are there any other franchises that you're interested in working in?
So, upcoming projects, my child, that's going to be the thing for the next few months,
yes.
I think. Like my wife runs a publishing house, and so we're both we both work very hard, and she also writes. So we're both taking as much time off as we can, which has been made easier by the grim circumstances we are currently living in. So I'm currently working on a novel, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet. And then in terms of other franchises, I would love... There's a bit of gap in my Doctor Who knowledge in terms of Big Finish. I've listened to some, but I wouldn't count myself an expert. I would love to do something Big Finish related. I'd love to do something. I'd love to write some Warhammer. Quite a big jump, but I'd love to try that. And yeah, and I have more Doctor Who stories I'd really love to tell. I'd love to do a Yaz procedural where in a noir city where she has to clear the Doctor's name, which actually might be relevant considering next things that are happening in the series. But I think one thing I like about the new season is that you definitely see the companions with tech in their hands. They're definitely it feels like, I know we haven't really seen it in the series and maybe my brain is just filling this in, but it feels like the Doctor is giving them lessons in high tech off screen and stuff. So I'd love to see Yaz apply her cop knowledge to some situations. I think that would be really fun.
Related to that, I'd love to see a story where the Doctor's trying to teach Graham some of that tech and he just doesn't get it.
Have a butcher's at this. Oh my god, I did not expect to like Bradley Walsh as much as I did, but I unashamedly I felt a pang with the whole granddad thing. I have far too many feelings as a person anyway, but I was just oh yeah, he's great. I really like him in it. I'd like to see. I listened to your coverage of The Good Doctor, and I do definitely. I know Juno a little bit, and I really enjoyed that book, and I think that they've each got something really interesting about them, and I would love to see more of that.
Yeah, all three of the fam.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today, and we want to thank Puffin and Penguin Random House for helping arrange this interview as well.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really loved your 12 Angels Weeping episode. Just you had really smart things to say, and thanks for showcasing my work. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, and I'm excited to go back and finish reading the book.
I'm excited for you to find out where it goes. Yeah. My Fraction Paradox, my masked peeps. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, I was looking forward to kind of getting it and reading it for Christmas, to have something to look forward to this Christmas. And the fact that there's Fraction Paradox, I was like, oh, wow. So
it's already up on the Wintertime Paradox is already up on the wiki, and I checked. Well, it's terrible. I occasionally wiki myself, but they're this is the first instance they've shown up. It's the first new Who appearance of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really, and my goal was really just to open the door so that loads more people can tell Faction Paradox stories. So I'm excited to see what happens next, basically, with them. So yeah, it was really fun. And luckily, the fans I've talked to, I did an AMA on Reddit, and people were like, "Yeah, we liked them," and I was like, "Oh, thank God," because I know how strongly people feel. But yeah, no, it's been really nice so far.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And I think we'll maybe leave it on a line from the Wintertime Paradox where the Doctor says, "I'm always surrounded, I'm always unarmed, and that's where I do my best work."
Thank you so much, guys. It's been really lovely.
Thank you. And until next time, this has been Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London.
And Dave in Dublin.
Happy reading.
Thank you for listening to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. Special thanks to George C. Music for use of their song Doctor Who Theme Swing Jazz Version. You can follow us on Twitter at ANDWBC Podcast and like us on Facebook. Help other listeners to find us by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. You can contact the show by emailing your thoughts to andwbcpodcast@gmail.com. And until next month, happy reading.
So I'm Matt, and
I'm Chris. Hi.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of your guys' podcast.
oh,
Thank you.
I started listening after you guys so kindly covered 12 Angels Weeping, and yeah, I'm just really enjoying. It's a lovely companion for, even if I haven't read the book, it's just, I like you guys talking me through it. So yeah, big fan.
well, thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
I do have to offer an apology up front. Myself and my wife are due our first kid any time now. So if I hang up very suddenly, it is because I am becoming a father. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. I asked Sarah if the baby arrives during the podcast, can I call it the all-new Doctor Who Book Club? And she was like, no.
It'd make for a good middle name.
Exactly.